Hi, this is Editor's Take. I'm Sakshi Batra, and with me is Gaurav Choudhary. He's the Deputy Executive Editor of Moneycontrol, and we are going to be discussing the latest NSSO study that has actually raised a fresh storm and raised questions regarding the India's GDP growth figures. Thanks a lot, Gaurav, for joining in. Now, this has raised some serious questions on the India's GDP data. What does the report really say?
So there are two things here. One, there is an NSSO, National Sample Survey Organization, which carried out a survey, of all the companies that were used, or the data that was used for corporate income used in national income calculations. That is called the MCA 21. It's the Ministry of Corporate Affairs data.
Yeah.
That is what it's called, MCA 21. This is part of the new methodology of GDP calculation, which we adopted in 2015 it was released, but it was adopted with the base year of 2011 and 12.
Right.
And before that, in the earlier series, the national income calculations was largely based on output data, which was based on the index of industrial production, and later on the annual survey of industries, which is the ASI. But the limitation of this IIP and ASI based data was that while IIP was output data, it did not have anything about value addition. It only calculated units produced. The ASI data was limited to only those firms which are registered under the Factories Act.
Correct.
But the Indian economy has evolved and become rapidly diversified also. So the earlier national income calculation did not have a system to actually capture all the economic activity that was taking place in the corporate world outside, in the unlisted corporate world outside of those who were registered under the Factories Act.
Sure.
So they decided to use the MCA 21 data. Now it is important to understand what is MCA 21. MCA 21 is a comprehensive compendium of corporate income data that which covers about 500,000 firms. So all companies are required to file their income statement and profit and loss account and other balance sheet related information with the Ministry of Corporate Affairs in the MCA portal, in the MCA 21 portal, and that is then used by the official statisticians under the Central Statistics Office to calculate national income data. Now, and which eventually leads to calculation of the gross domestic product, or GDP data. We need to understand what is GDP. GDP is the total value of goods and services produced in the country. Now, what are those goods and services? So somebody's income is somebody's expenditure.
Correct.
So in the final analysis, it is the income of all household, corporate entities, etc. And also in the final analysis, it is the spending and expenditure of all these.
Sure.
So if I am going and buying something at a grocery shop, it is the grocer's income, but my spending. Likewise, if a company is paying me salary, it's the company's spending and my income. So in the final analysis, so there are three ways you calculate GDP. One is through the production method, and one is through the income method, and another is through the expenditure method.
Sure.
So in the final, all three should be same.
Yeah.
And now, how do you calculate corporate income data, or how do you calculate value added in the corporate sector?
Correct.
So the government decided, and decided to set up a committee, and the committee gave a report, and based on which they decided to use the MCA 21 data as the most reliable data for evaluating or estimating value addition in the corporate income. But now the latest NSSO data has said that, according to a survey that they carried out, of all the firms that they surveyed, about 39%, which is a very high proportion, were out of coverage, and then about 12% or so were untraceable. A large part of this could also be the fact that many of these probably would be shell companies.
Yes.
And as we know, since from 2017 onwards, after demonetization and GST's rollout, there has been a crackdown on shell companies.
Sure.
And official data clearly shows that about more than 3 lakh, close to 4 lakh companies, shell companies or paper companies, have actually shut down. So they may be untraceable. But what is the impact of all of this on GDP? Does it mean that we have been overestimating our GDP?
Absolutely.
I don't think that is the case, because, and I mean, there are views on both sides of the argument here. But if you ask me, I don't think that is the case, because, as I said, GDP calculation is both a function of income as well as expenditure.
Sure.
So if a shell company was set up and it was filing its income statement and balance sheet with the MCA 21 before and is not doing now, and therefore is untraceable, doesn't mean that the expenditure is not happening. The spending is happening. So a shell company would have been most likely set up to evade taxes.
Yeah.
It has got nothing to do with how much they were, how much they were spending. So on the spending side, that is getting captured through the various expenditure surveys in any case. What has happened in all of these is that there could be, there could be differences, or there could be discrepancies in the sectoral estimates of GDP. Say,
Sure.
for instance, in some shell companies would have been created by manufacturing companies, but would have actually carrying out trading activity. So the manufacturing GDP may have been overestimated
Okay.
if these firms have become untraceable now. But in the final analysis, I don't think there would be too much of a discrepancy, because a certain number of firms have disappeared from the MCA 21 compendium,
Right.
because expenditure anyway is getting captured in the GDP. That is also true of black money, because the question is often asked: is India's parallel and bustling black economy actually captured in the GDP data?
Yeah,
It is.
it
It is
is.
captured in the GDP data, because black economy is about undisclosed income.
Yeah.
Black money is about undisclosed income. It is about hidden wealth. It is about hidden assets, and it is about evading taxes. It is not about evading expenditure. The spending is happening. So that spending activity is captured in the GDP calculation data. It may not be calculated in the tax data, but in the spending data, that is being calculated.
Right.
So likewise, if a company has disappeared because it's a shell company, and it was a paper company and it has stopped activity,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that the spending that the company was doing, or on behalf of the parent company which had created that shell company, that spending continues to take place, and that spending is taking place within, and that is being captured within the GDP calculation.
Right. But does this also raise questions on the credibility of CSO, or should the CSO have done its own validation and credibility or the scrutiny of
Yes.
this MCA 21, so that whenever they would produce this database?
So there is a I mean, CSO has been in the news for all the wrong reason for several months now. Most recently, it was in the news because NITI Aayog came out with a back series data which shows that in the UPA years, the GDP growth was not as rapid as it was originally
Yeah.
made out to be. So that is one set of controversy, and it also because NITI Aayog was conventionally, it is the CSO that releases GDP or national accounts related data.
Yeah.
So questions were raised that what was NITI Aayog doing there, and NITI Aayog clearly is not should not have been the competent authority or the agency to be talking about national income statistics. So that was one bit of controversy. The second bit of controversy is that why isn't the CSO doing its independent verification of MCA
Yeah.
21 data?
Yeah.
That is something that the CSO cannot do much, because
Okay.
its hands are tied.
Okay.
The MCA 21 data is collated by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, and it is not made public. The data, in the final data, is not made public. It is only given to the national income statisticians, and the national income statisticians every year use some kind of a cutoff date. Say, for instance, early part of December. Based on which they use it as a proxy to calculate the rest of the corporate income economic activity. So this is where I don't think the CSO can actually go ahead and do an independent validation. But what this report, the technical report of the NSSO has done, is has actually flagged the issue that there are huge gaps in the MCA compendium that needs to be fixed.
But will India lose face before global investors, and does this also deal a blow to Modi government, which is amidst the Lok Sabha elections as
No.
well? Two more phases are to go.
Well, there are two sides of this argument. I mean, there are many facets to this argument. One, the decision to come out with a revised methodology of calculating GDP was taken in the UPA 2 era. And the decision to move the base to 11-12 and change the formula for calculation was taken then. And there was a committee set up, and there were various levels of debate and discussion that happened. I mean, no system is perfect, but I think this is something that Modi government decided to launch the new data, new
Right.
series in 2015. It was not their decision, but they decided to launch it. That is one part of the argument. The other part of the argument is that does it lose credibility? The new methodology of the GDP or any GDP national income calculation data is actually validated by the International Monetary Fund.
Sure.
So to that extent, this methodology would have been also, and I would believe so, would have been run past the IMF, and the government would have obtained validation from the IMF on the methodology that they have.
Okay.
But the problem here is not of the methodology. The problem here is of data collection, and to what extent the data that we're collecting and the quality of data, is it good enough to ensure that we have a system of statistics that is credible enough and remains consistent over a longer period of time.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Gaurav, for sharing all that insight. Well, questions have been raised by the NSSO study on the, India's number regime, which has already been reeling under the credibility crisis. Now, will this be proven? What will the government really say is what we'll have to wait and watch out for. Thanks a lot for joining us in this edition of Editor's Take, and do stay logged on to moneycontrol.com for more news and updates. Thanks for watching.